I actually wanted to put a question to Ben, because I'm always curious for his take on things, about this whole idea of election denialism. Like, this term election denier is now in popular currency, where every Republican who raises any concern or doubt about anything to do with the manner in which votes are counted or tabulated, or the way in which ballots are received, they're all election deniers now, and therefore this like cataclysmic threat to democracy, and therefore planning some insurrection 2.0 or domestic terrorism or whatever. That's like the grand theory that Democrats seem to be going with. So I'm just wondering if you think that it would be reasonable to postulate that post 2016 there was another species of quote unquote election denialism that was incredibly rampant among Democrats. I mean, I can cite to you in about 2 seconds the polling data, which showed that a supermajority, so 67+% of Democratic voters post 2016 election, as far as late as 2018-19, believed not just that the election was unfairly won by Donald Trump in some vague sense, but that Russia actually hacked the voting machines themselves and fraudulently installed Trump into power. Now, that seems like a potential delegitimization, quote unquote, of the election, but I don't remember, people screaming like a chicken with their head chopped off that was this like profound threat to democracy, and showed how insidious and destructive election denialism was, and like tore at the fabric of our democracy. And I'm just wondering why not, and why this like Republican version, which does obviously exist in some fashion, is like just presumptively this major threat, where the Democratic variation, which also plainly exists, is like just something that we're supposed to memory hole.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are obviously versions of like Russiagate stuff that were ridiculous and people said silly things. I would never deny that. But I also think there are some pretty big disanalogies between the two cases. One of them is when you look at attempts to actually overturn the result of the election, which I think is the biggest deal. You certainly had some people, liberal celebrities, who were doing this like pretty peripheral stuff with the Hamilton electors or whatever to try to do that. But they, you didn't really get like, Hillary Clinton engaged in months and months of attempts to overturn the result of the election, and to try to get it to be not certified, and et cetera. So, I mean, I think that even if you have like, I mean, I was never a Russiagate guy. I always thought that was like severely overstated, but like, I still think that like one of these things is on the face of it a lot worse than the other, certainly in terms of like the caliber of the people. I mean, the sitting president of the United States was very openly trying very hard to get the result of the election overturned. There wasn't really anything equivalent like what you're talking.
Wait, Ben, you mean funding Jill Stein for a recount wasn't the election the election fraud conspiracy that Trump put forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I think what Mike is describing is mostly a media phenomenon. That's the distinction.
It wasn't solely a media phenomenon, though. And I grant, of course.
But the real question is, what did Dems do after, and then what did Republicans do after? And I think the gap there is as wide as can be. Dems eventually went no further than continuing to question it.
Well, they weren't just questioning. There were congressional investigations, to be clear, but absolutely there were actual Republican
no congressional
audits.
Investigations to whether Trump won the election.
Wait, hold on, Matt, real quick. Matt, your microphone. It sounds like you're having a sampling error right now. I don't know if it's
what's going on?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought that might have been just me, but yeah, I heard it too.
Go.
Yeah. I mean, Ben, I agree that obviously there are disanalogies between what the Republicans did post 2020 and what Democrats did post 2016. I'm not saying that they're equivalent or even that they're equally grave in their offensiveness. I'm simply noting that Republicans are kind of frivolously labeled or capriciously labeled, quote, election deniers, even if they rhetorically voice doubts as to the veracity of election results. So forget what Donald Trump even himself did, or forget like the more concrete actions that were taken. Even like a Republican congressional candidate or something who said, gee whiz, maybe the Pennsylvania mail-in balloting system was not entirely flawless, or maybe there were some issues in Fulton County, Georgia, or whatever. Even if they expressed just some kind of rhetorical doubts as to the legitimacy of the vote They're called election deniers. Whereas you have people like John Lewis. John Lewis, who's like not just a media guy, right? John Lewis is this titanic figure in the lore of the Democratic Party. He went on Meet the Press ahead of Trump's inauguration in 2017, said he was boycotting it on the ground that Trump was illegitimately elected because Russia stole the election for him. That's what John Lewis said, and I can give you countless other examples of not just
what did John Lewis actually
but major elected officials. So why is their rhetorical posture to undermine the legitimacy of the 2016 election? Why doesn't that get them labeled election deniers?
What did John Lewis actually do, though?
He vocally expressed his belief that Trump had been illegitimately installed into office by the Kremlin, therefore undermining the legitimacy of the 2016 election, just as many Republicans express a similar attitude toward the 2020 election without actually taking any tangible action and are nonetheless labeled election deniers and threats to democracy.
I mean, the real problem is the ones that took the action, though, and that's what people focus on. Is my mic fixed, by the way, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean that seems like the thing. It seems like that the reason that election, that like this term that you're objecting to, I think, is in circulation so much more right now that that Republicans weren't able to get similar amount of juice out of Democrats, like casting doubts on the legitimacy of the 2016 election, is that for the most part, like again, outside of like extremely peripheral things like the Hamilton electors non-event or whatever, like there were really no attempts, and certainly no attempts with like big important people, certainly anybody who's remotely as important as the sitting president of the United States, to actually take action to overturn it. So it's like, I think it makes sense that being associated with, fairly or unfairly, and look, maybe in some of these cases you could make a case that it's unfair. I don't know who specifically you're thinking of who's made comments as mild as the ones you're thinking of, but whether it's fair or not, yeah, being associated with a camp of people who did things to try to overturn the election, like ranging from months and months of lawsuits to actually
asking the vice president of the United States not to certify the election.
Exactly, right.
Making phone calls to elected representatives to try to get them to find votes.
Right, etc. Right. I mean, like that just is going to be a bigger deal, I think.
So I do want to stop us here because
no matter what you think about Russiagate, and like even if you think that was, even if you're sympathetic to the left-wing critique of like, of the excesses of Russia, of like Russiagate paranoia and all that stuff, that still does seem pretty different to me.
So there's this Republican candidate for the House of Representatives in New Hampshire. Her name is Caroline Leavitt. She was a press aide in the Trump White House. She did not participate in January 6th, but she has made comments about how she believes Trump won the 2020 election, right? So she didn't take any tangible action to like effectuate Trump's ability to retain power. She just rhetorically lent credence to the idea that Trump had won the election and Biden had not been legitimately elected, right? So she, of course, is labeled an election denier. That's the term of art now. She gets called an election denier and therefore is portrayed as this grievous threat to democracy. And the reason why I bring up the parallel to post-2016 is because you have people like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Adam Schiff, Elizabeth Warren, even the upper echelons of the Democratic Party. I found the quotes recently. They all said some variation of Russia hacked the election in 2016, right? So how is that not casting doubt on the legitimacy of the 2016 election in a way that is at least approximately analogous to what people like Caroline Leavitt are doing when they say, because of problems with mail-in voting related to COVID, Trump actually is the rightful winner, right? So why don't we therefore retroactively castigate these icons of the Democratic Party as quote-unquote election deniers and threats to democracy because they were sowing doubt about that outcome?
Yeah, there's a huge difference, okay? Number one, I think it is fair to criticize Democrats that are it's fair to criticize Democrats that said things like that. So when Hillary Clinton said that he was an illegitimate president, I think it was either Obama or Biden might have said something. It's fair to criticize those people for doing those things. That's fine. But the level of election denialism that Trump has engaged in is on another level. right? The phone calls to Georgia, all of the lawsuits throughout the entirety of the United States, the challenges.
I wasn't talking about Trump. I was talking about a Republican candidate for Congress.
No, I understand, but I'm saying like it matters who it comes from.
This is what I was saying earlier, Mike. That I think that like, look, it's, you know, you want to say a lot of these like claims that were made about Russia after 2016 were ridiculous. I agree with you. I've always agreed with that. I mean, you can go back and look at the social media receipts going back years. I think a lot of that stuff was centrist Democrat cope for the fact that Hillary Clinton ran a shitty campaign and lost an election that she should have easily won. But
Bernie Sanders indulged in it too, so it wasn't centrist.
Okay, but I mean, like, I don't think that it existed. I don't think the primary driver of it, right, was
not a primary driver, but he can indulge in it.
Sure, yes, that's true. So they have but like the question. So look, as far as that goes, I'm with you. But I think if the question is why is election denialism treated as a bigger deal this time, or is perceived to be a bigger threat to the ability of the democratic process to go on, public confidence in it, all that stuff. It's because some, not all, but some of the people in this camp that you're describing actually took these massive concrete actions to try to overturn the will of the voters. So of course, being associated with the people who, you know, throwing in your lot, even rhetorically, with the people who are taking those actions is going to be a bigger deal than just being part of a camp that did nothing but just talk.
Okay, question for all of you guys, though. Do you think that requesting an audit is in and of itself an attempt to overthrow the will of the voters? An audit or investigation?
Oh, no, but that wasn't the only thing that happened. It was like
part
of like
absolutely,
a huge bag of tricks.
That wasn't the only thing that happened.
If that was the only thing that would happen, I don't think we'd be having this conversation.
Yeah. Also, the thing that Michael keeps bringing up, though, just seems to be like one party's base's opinion over and over again. Like, what happened to any of these politicians? Nothing. Because you're just like, you're focusing on like Dems called these people an election denier and Republicans called those people an election denier. Why is it okay? I mean,
yeah,
okay to who? Okay to who?
A lot of these people that you're saying have been labeled as election deniers are going to win their elections, right?
Right. Marjorie Taylor Greene just won in Georgia. What's her punishment?
Sort of grave consequences for this. It's just like somebody said something mean about them, and in some cases it's inconsistent. I might even agree that in some cases it's inconsistent, but I also think it's reasonable to treat election denialism in a context where everything that Stephen was listing off earlier happened as a bigger deal than people mostly making statements and doing investigations, but not actually taking concrete efforts to overturn the 2016 election.
So, little update for Georgia. Herschel Walker has taken the lead by 1,800 votes.
Oh, but Ben, I think you're missing the forest for the trees, or maybe that's the wrong metaphor. If you say that it was just a bunch of loose talk from some pundits and even some politicians related to the 2016 election, there was a concerted, coordinated effort within the national security apparatus that was aligned with factions of the Democratic Party in the 2016 election, then even into Trump's presidency in 2017, whereby unprecedented action was taken to thwart Trump as a candidate and then as a president on the basis of widespread belief.
Wait. That's not true. The unprecedented, hold on. There was an unprecedented action.
Illicitly in some sort of collusive arrangement with Putin, and therefore was a national security threat.
Why not talk about the unprecedented?
Why not talk about denialism that was prevalent?
Why not talk
back
about
then that actually did result in extremely tangible and consequential action that was, in a real sense, designed to thwart the democratic will. I mean, there was even contemplation for a time.
No, okay.
Because Trump was supposedly
what about Comey?
In a
what about Comey? What about Comey?
With Putin,
what about
that
Comey?
He was going to be ousted from office under the 25th Amendment.
All right, I don't think we're going to get any further on this subject.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.